Let's talk brain drain again. Now, I said again because the problem persists, and the sooner we find a solution, the better. So, brain drain, but this time in the education sector. The issue of brain drain is not just limited to the medical or technical fields. It has also permeated into the education sector, particularly in developing countries like Nigeria. Now, the Academic Staff Union of Universities in the country has recently raised concerns about the increasing number of lecturers resigning and seeking opportunities abroad, leaving behind a shortage of educators and a deteriorating infrastructure. The challenges faced by the education sector in Nigeria are multifaceted. Not only are there not enough lecturers to meet the growing demand of students, but the existing infrastructure is in a state of disrepair. The government's efforts to address this issue by building more universities and admitting more students have been met with skepticism, of course, by the academic community, as they argue that simply increasing the number of institutions or the numbers of students does not address the underlying issue of staff shortage and poor facilities. Well, that said, joining us now to discuss this, first we're joined by Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, lecturer at the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us, Abdulrahman.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. We also have joining us in the studio, Razaq Olokba, a public affairs analyst, fellow chartered public administrator. Thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Well, gentlemen, you have seen the pandemic at hand, the issue of lecturers resigning en masse and most especially traveling out to look for greener pastures. Abdulrahman, I'm going to ask you first. We're seeing cases of poor and delayed salaries. We're seeing cases of unpaid allowances, poor infrastructure, lack of respect for the academic community, and the seeming dwindling hope that these present. If these reasons are not enough, then I don't know what is. But the question is, has it always been like this? You know, lecturers having to suffer this fate, the education sector experiencing deteriorating infrastructure and having to, you know, complain and lament about it over and over again. Has it always been like this?
Thank you very much for your wonderful question. I want to say that it is not always like that. We find ourselves where we are today as a result of the implementation of neoliberal economic order under President Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida in the 80s. And that took a toll on the educational sector, including those educators that are vibrant, those educators that are bridging the gap between theory and practice, who made Nigerian universities to be very thick. You remember there were other lecturers too that were not from Nigeria that were deported from this country. You see, the hallmark of a very productive academic environment is the ability to research, to disseminate information, to speak truth to power, and to stick to one's principle. And that was where we were in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the early 80s. And Nigeria was a destination for a lot of foreign educators. For instance, you have people like Patrick Wilmot, people like Bangura, and a host of others. You have Henneke and others that were in ABU, even in University of Maiduguri, University of Ibadan. You find foreigners trooping to Nigeria because the pay was good, because the academic environment was okay, and the people were allowed to air their view in conformity with their democratic rights and responsibility to society. At a point, the military government, especially of Ibrahim Babangida, found this very particular democratic license that allow lecturers to air their views, to criticize government and government policies that are not working. And they began to feel that these lecturers were a threat to the system. And for instance, Patrick Wilmot was deported from Nigeria simply because he was exercising his right as a lecturer who meant well for Nigeria and Nigerians. So it has not always been like this. The environment was okay. People were, in fact, in the 70s, if you ask any bright Nigerian, what do you want to do? The first thing that the person will tell you is, I want to become a lecturer in the university. And that is changing today because of a lot of factors, including the low pay that we are receiving. So the space is contracted. the pay is not good compared to other countries. And then if in the 70s, other countries, national, were clamoring to come to Nigeria to come and take up teaching appointment, even at the level of secondary school. And then in 2023, where we would have thought that the mixture we'll be having will not be only Nigerians alone, but people from different parts of the world coming to Nigerian universities to lecture. And then you now find Nigerians are turning the universities to a catchment area, to the extent that somebody from Sokoto cannot go to Nsukka to lecture because it's not his catchment area. And then the university system has been turned into mail ticket for the appointment of even people that are not qualified, people that don't even have the capacity to carry out research. These are some of the issues, in addition to what the government has done in terms of underfunding, in terms of ensuring that Nigerian intellectuals always lick the boot of politicians that are not even up to their intellectual capacity. So it's unfortunate. As where we find ourselves is a situation that we brought upon ourselves, not by anybody, not by Europeans, not by Russians, not by Indians, but it is a situation that we brought upon ourselves as Nigerians. While government has its own portion of blame, the academicians too equally have their own portion of blame, because those that are administrating our universities, or those that are those that are administrating our universities are not from the political parties. They are part and parcel of the university communities. And then we have that fund that is dedicated to providing infrastructure to ensure that the university environment is conducive for learning. So the question is, if the government is not willing to advance the cost of Nigerian universities, so what are we doing as lecturers? What are we doing as critical stakeholders? What are we doing as intelligentials to ensure that we turn this stake around for a better educational system equivalent to what we used to have in 1970s?
Thank you, Professor Hamisu, for that. Let me go to Mr. Olokba. Now, what measures would you say can be taken? We've seen the problem at hand. We've seen what the challenges are. I think that we can say that these lecturers are justified to want to find greener pastures, because looking at where they're coming from, it's not very conducive, it's not very convenient. So, but what measures can be taken to retain and attract talented educators that we're losing on a daily basis?
We are in a very, very traumatized moment of our life. Just like what my colleague have said, if you look at what has happened to the Nigerian educational sector, you will be bothered about the future of Nigeria, because the first 10 most economically advanced countries in the world have something to do with the quality of their education. Britain, America, China, Germany, India, they have sound education for the young men. If you have an uneducated population, you are in for it. So I'm bothered about what this portends for the future of Nigeria. And we are seeing it already. We have seen decline in production. We have seen so many things that have happened to our life in the economy, up to the security of our nation. It's part of a lack of proper and sufficient and qualitative education. Like I said, in the 70s, when I was in primary school, I attended a private primary school. I was taught by Britain. I was taught by Indians and Ghanaians. Likewise, when I was in secondary school, even despite the fact that in my secondary school, I did not attend private institutions, I attended public institutions, I was taught by foreigners. But the decline began to show, like I said, when the military took over. And that is why the greatest aberration that has ever happened to Nigerian government is the military. But the period of lamentation is over. Let's begin to face how we are going to come out of this. And that's why I like the courage of a professor for admitting that it's a shared blame. Our colleague in the university community, as a member of the civil society, they always get angry when they say you have a portion of blame in all of this. They get angry, and they say if you can criticize government and government can admit their errors, why will ASUU not admit their errors? And one of the errors of ASUU is their refusal to admit that to come out of it is a shared responsibility. When Labour took over from Bafia, that's Oshiomhole took over Bafia, we were combative with each other, civil society and NSC, that the era of the military where you assume the government must do everything is over. Labor has a role to play in terms of price control, critical sector of the economy. What role are you going to play in it? Work with the Manufacturer Association. Coming back to education, so that I won't deviate. We have said it that you cannot assume that the government has the capacity to fix everything. Since 1998, we have always been having issue between ASUU and the government, and that is what has led to the brain drain. What the ASUU should do at the moment is to enforce the legislation that anybody that has anything to do, in fact, public office holders, must not take their children out of this country for education again. And they think that's too bogus. I said, yes, it might be too bogus, but you must build agitation around it. As long as some people have their children taken out of this country to get a better education, and leaving the son of the poor with this rickety education, because it's rickety. When you train half-baked graduates, you know, half-baked graduate is worse than even illiteracy, because a lawyer that is not well-baked will cause trouble for you as a client. A doctor that is not well-baked, it causes. So, in essence, what I'm saying is that there must be practical step by encouraging ASUU, our sister colleague in the struggle, that don't assume that the government will just go ahead and do the needful. You have not done the needful since 1999. There must be a legislation that anybody that is in the public sector, Atiku Abubakar had university, a former vice president, Obasanjo had university. That's an aberration in Nigeria. So as long as you permit that, the welfare of lecturers, the welfare of the people in the academics will not be taken serious. So for me, I want more of professor to have the courage to speak out to ASUU, to admit that the driving seat, you have to join the government in the driving seat. The driving seat does not belong to the government alone. You are part of the governance. It is the military psychology that to assume that, oh, okay, we sit here, you sit there, let's negotiate. No, that's not struggles waged all over the world. I read Public Wilmot's book, very brilliant and intelligent academics and struggle. He was harassed out of this country during the June 12 struggle against the military. And I have so many of people like that who came from outside the country. They are not here again. So for us, let's begin to be assertive. And in be assertive, let's begin to take practical steps. ASUU will soon go on strike again. I will say this is a needless struggle. The more you assume that the government is going to do something about it, the more you are wasting the time of our children. You will come back again. You must recognize since 1993 that something is wrong somewhere, which is the capacity. The way Nigeria is structured at the moment is part of the reason why it becomes impossible for government to spend so much on education. We have 36 Commission of Education. We have so about 30 agencies on education on this slim budget. And that is why lecturers are unable to be paid. Money for chemicals are being used to pay senators who serve in the Committee on Education, to pay for House of Rep member who serve in the Committee of Education, House of Assembly member who serve in the Committee of Education.
Okay.
See, if you don't hold the system by the jugular, you will not be taken serious.
Right. Okay, Mr. Olokba, thank you for that. And I like that you did mention the government, because that's tilting towards where my next question is going to come from. And now, Professor Hamisu, you've heard what Mr. Olokba said. In terms of what the government can do, right, maybe we shouldn't focus more on what the government is doing right now that is distracting us from prioritizing the education sector. But in terms of what the government can do, what role does the government play, or can the government play, in addressing the issues faced by the education sector, the lecturers especially who are moving out en masse?
All right, thank you so very much. I'm of the opinion, and I continue to hold this opinion, that if the lecturers, the intelligentials within the university community cannot use what is being given to them judiciously for the purpose of research, for production of knowledge, for dissemination of knowledge, to ensure that the right things are done, then we have a problem. You see, what goes into the educational system to produce a very quality education that we need for our development and our advancement are diverse things. For instance, you need funding from government. You need infrastructure from government. You need supervision from government. Then from the lecturers and the administrators in the university, they require some level of discipline themselves so that we don't have issues around harassment, sex for grade, selling of grade, changing of result, selling of admission. All of these are things that usually combine to undermine the quality of education that a society is supposed to have. And then when you don't have this, even if they give you the whole budget of Nigeria, you are not going to achieve anything. So, and that is why when we have a graduate on the day of convocation, they are always presented before the chancellor to say that these particular set of graduates are found to be worthy in character and learning, which means they are disciplined, they are committed to knowledge production, and they are committed to advancing the course of knowledge. Without this, then there is a problem. Secondly, it all depends on where the university administrators are channeling the monies that are coming from government. For instance, when you have lecturers that cannot apply for research funds from the university, nobody is giving anybody anything for research. You go on your own to do your research, to come to class. You can go for conferences to fertilize ideas and cross-fertilize ideas with your colleagues. And then you find university management buying luxury cars, riding cars that are worth 70 million, bulletproof cars. You find some vice chancellors moving as if they are ministers of the federation. There is a misplaced priority. The university of administrators are there to ensure that we have a conducive environment to be able to do our job. And now you have university management riding cars that if you cost them is about say 200 million or 300 million. So tell me, how are you going to explain this? What are we going to do with the cars? A university environment is supposed to be an environment that you are conditioned by the fact that you have sense of propriety, you have sense of proportion, because we don't do things that are outrageous. But today we are competing with the senators, we are competing with ministers in terms of the kind of cars, the kind of clothes, the kind of answer that we are using. Right. And then you now come to government to say that there is no funding. So what I'm saying in essence is that in as much as government is lagging behind in terms of the required funding, the question is, the literature has been given to us. What did we do to it? The discipline, the commitment that we needed in order to produce quality students. Yeah. What are we doing in terms of that? Okay. Why are we having sexual harassment on our campuses? Why are we having scandals about results and the rest? So there are a whole lot of issues that, as I said, is a shared challenge that we need to admit, and then we have to work together as partners to solve them.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Hamisu. Very quickly, I want us to talk about, let's not forget that this is not just a lecturer's problem or a government problem or the problem of the educational sector. This is also the problem of the parents whose students have to go home or whose students cannot, do not have enough lecturers teaching them. It's also the problem of the students whose education are at risk. So I'm going to ask you, Mr. Olokba, and this is going to be my final question, but what impact does the brain drain have both physically, mentally, psychologically on these students' academic experience and their future?
Well, thank you very much. For the young people, they have their own blame in all of this. It might not be as much as that of the parent, the government, and the lecturers. But when we were in school, I remember clearly that the first rustication I got was in 1989. On my own, I was able to determine that SHARP, Structural Adjustment Program, cannot portend any good for Nigeria. And I joined the protest, and I was sent out of school for 2 years. I ended up spending 9 years in school. After the death of Abuja, I was mobilized to go for NYC. Otherwise, maybe we would still be in school if Abuja had been alive. But what I'm saying in essence is that the young people these days, I have a concern about the way they conduct themselves. You see people going to school and coming back after school, and you be wondering that he just left school. In fact, his character, his level of knowledge was better before he went to the higher institution. So for me, also, the young people also have a role to play in all of this.
Right.
I'm not saying that people should not go abroad to go and study, but we should reflect on it that your age mate made UK, America, Canada what it is today. And we are passing through an historical process. America and all these countries are passed through that process. There are young people stayed and combated the challenges that I have. So I will encourage the Nigerian that despite the fact that it might be so challenging, it's better to stay back and confront what is combating our nation.
Right.
And I know that if you do that, we are going to come out better of it.
All right. I really would have loved to ask some more questions, but because of our time, we're going to end it here. Thank you so much, Abdulrahman, Professor Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, the lecturer at the Department of Political Science and International Relations, University of Abuja. And a big thank you as well to my studio guest, Mr. Razaq Olokba, Public Affairs Analyst, fellow Chartered Public Administrator. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. All right, this is still Village Square Africa. When we come back, we're going to look at the deteriorating economic situation in Zimbabwe, talking about the debt burden they have incurred and how to get out of it. Do stay with us.